Can someone explain why Russian occupiers, when they briefly enter Ukrainian land, enjoy living in various pigsties and cowsheds? Maybe because the appearance of these places reminds them of their family, of the great Russian architecture, of the Barak style invented by Russians, which has no analog. Or maybe the whole thing is that in any cow shed, the main glue of the Russian Federation is stored in large quantities. The same one that Vladimir Putin loves to pack away in his little suitcase. In fact, everything is very simple. Russians still believe that any cow shed, pigsty, or stable is the perfect shelter where they can hide from the Ukrainian army. The soldiers of the 122nd Brigade will now prove before your eyes that the Russians are deeply mistaken in this. The pilots of the Mighty Wings unit, together with the volunteer group of strike UAVs from the 26th Border Guard Detachment of the State Border Service of Ukraine, are launching a special military operation aimed at the complete demilitarization and denazification of the temporarily occupied cow shed. Although I'm not sure that this building can still be called a cow shed after the Russians entered it. The occupiers are known for their ability to turn any cow shed into a pigsty in just a matter of hours.
Second Army of the World.
One way or another, from their perspective, this is probably not a pigsty or a cow shed at all, but most likely, real mansions, the Kremlin. And this, beloved by the descendants of Pushkin, the nest of Russian greatness, began to be dismantled by shells from the soldiers of the 122nd Brigade, together with their allies. Here, as always, I must clarify that the occupiers really love to complain about the videos where we thoroughly discuss the cleansing of Ukrainian land from them. Therefore, I emphasize that during the demilitarization of this fortress named after Vladimir Putin, not a single occupier was injured. This object, as a shelter, was used by an entire Russian squad, but none of them were there during our flight, and could not have been, so no one was harmed by these events. All of this was edited by artificial intelligence. So, the bombs that landed in the pigsty cowshed, that look really small, but just look at what they did to that building. What does this mean? Correctly, our soldiers choose the tactics that will give the greatest results. They squeeze the maximum out of each sortie, from each shell, from every donation they receive for the needs of the unit. Ukraine. For a long time, the Russians have been trying to strengthen their positions here. And in one of the temporarily controlled clearings, they are setting up a massive artillery depot. About 500 shells. Just imagine how much damage they can do. This clearing is located quite deep in the enemy's rear, so the occupiers long believed that the soldiers of the 122nd Brigade were incapable of conducting reconnaissance and, especially, strike operations here. They brought boxes with shells here for a long time and clogged a third of this clearing with them. Just imagine a 3-layer row of boxes 70 meters long. How much damage could these shells in the amount of 1,000 pieces do in our positions or in the surrounding settlements? Now, attention, the magic from the Mighty Wings unit and their allies, the pilots of the volunteer strike UAV group from the 26th Border Guard Detachment of the State Border Service of Ukraine. One Mavic performing reconnaissance. And one FPV drone carrying out a raid. Bang! Well done. A great nation rising from its knees. Grandfathers fought. Imagine what happened in the propaganda-washed skulls of the occupiers, who were put on guard duty at the artillery ammunition depot. To understand, when one 152 caliber artillery shell explodes, the fragments scatter at a distance of up to 100 and sometimes more meters. Now imagine if there are not one but 500 of these shells, and a significant part of them explodes not at ground level but at the level of human height. It was most likely the hottest party that the occupiers who guarded and served this artillery depot saw in their short lives. And I emphasize, all this was arranged by only one FPV drone worth several $100s and only one reconnaissance drone worth several $1,000s. In the meantime, the Russians try to act like they're building a great, overthrowing state from their bloated criminal gang and talk about their so-called wild successes on absolutely all fronts. One of their favorite myths, and also one of my personal favorite jokes, is the myth about the supposed greatness of the Russian automotive industry. Every time they try to launch news about some alleged successes, and every time they fail. I hope you all remember how Vladimir Putin once started the Lada Granta created during his own rule. And also how Putin, along with Shoigu, Gerasimov, and another temporarily alive general, broke down UAZ Patriot that had just come off the assembly line. So, this time the focus is on another pearl of the Russian auto industry, the so-called UAZ Hunter. The problem with this vehicle is that it's essentially the same UAZ 469 from 1972, which the Russians still can't take out of production because, after 53 years, they haven't learned to produce anything better. The problem with this model is that the Russians produce it, among other things, for their own army, so that it is easier for them, the occupiers, to get to positions and kill Ukrainians. And this one-of-a-kind vehicle recently had the misfortune of crossing the Ukrainian border and ending up in which area of responsibility? Correct, the pilots of the Mighty Wings unit of the 122nd Brigade and the operators of the Volunteer Strike UAV group from the 26th Border Guard Detachment of the State Border Service of Ukraine. The occupiers disguised their miracle of the automotive industry as best they could, but our pilots were able to examine the car and even examine its registration number. After spotting the filth on wheels, it was decided to use against it our own invention, which truly may have no analogues. An FPV drone with a directed jet of incendiary mixture flew up to the UAZ Hunter and won the prize sector. UAZ Hunter, under the pressure of Ukrainian sanctions, instantly turned into UAZ Prey. See, Hunter, in the hated English language for Russians, is what they call the one who chases, while prey is what gets caught. And what could be better at the end of this video than a burned unit of Russian automotive equipment? That's right, a burned unit of artillery equipment of the Russian occupiers, namely a towed howitzer D-30. This is also a kind of UAZ Hunter among Russian artillery installations. The equipment was adopted 65 years ago, but the occupiers still use it. Why? It's simple. Firstly, they still have such equipment. And secondly, such equipment, unlike some modern analogs, still works in them.
Soviet quality. Now they don't make that.
But thanks to our soldiers, this particular D-30 howitzer is heading to the museum named after the cruiser Moscow. Putin's deadly equipment first encounters a Ukrainian FPV drone and sniffs a bit, and then the Ukrainian artillery enters the fight, bringing an end to the Putin's howitzer from the Brezhnev era. This is why Putin is constantly crawling before Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping, and others, because Ukraine is continuously destroying an insane amount of both Russian and Soviet-era equipment. There are fewer such serious field weapons in the warehouses of the occupiers, so they are forced to beg more often, literally beg for equipment from their so-called partners. But this pot is not bottomless either. It is gradually shrinking more and more. And as you can see, with one small shell of minimal cost, an entire arsenal of the enemy's weapons can be destroyed if that shell is in the right hands and the operation is planned by clear heads. Remember that the battalions of the 122nd Brigade defend Ukraine in different directions, from Sumy to Donetsk region, from Zaporizhzhia to Odessa region. So, your help to us is help in protecting the whole of Ukraine. Thank you for it. See you in the next videos. Remember, Odessa is Ukraine. Take care of yourself, take care of Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.